one time I want to crack my neck to make it sound really goofy. So I want to talk about the dead films, Romero's dead films. In this case, I'll probably do either a part at the end of this video or a follow-up part where I talk about the remakes, not Return to the Living Dead, unfortunately, but the and not the Giallo. My God, there are so many technically sequels and remakes that are Italian films, like the zombie ones and whatever, like the Fulci film and whatever. That's like a sequel to the Italian cut of Dawn of the Dead. Oh my God. I could make a whole video talking about that. I won't, but I want to talk about the because I want to actually have seen the films before I talk about them. I don't want to talk about the concept of where they came from, what they were, whatever. There's a whole slew of zombie sequels that are all sequels to either Dawn of the Dead or something else that Romero has done. If you want to seek them out, look it up. But I do want to talk about the Night of the Living Dead remake, the Dawn of the Dead remake, and the Day of the Dead remake, either at the end of this video or as a special next video. But for this one, I want to talk about Romero's films. I've recently dived into all 6 of his zombie live-action versions, and they have been really interesting to watch. Like, God, now I'm thinking of how there's a Day of the Dead TV show, there's an animated Night of the Living Dead. There's so many different things. But still, it goes to show how such a concept, such a thing like Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and Day and Land and Diary and Survival are very prominent films in pop culture. Obviously, Romero being known as like the master, king of, I was going to say king of the dead, the guy who made the zombies what they are today, because zombies had kind of already existed to some degree, but they were mostly just like reincarnation through voodoo to bring back the dead. But then it was, what if they were just living dead? There was no spiritual stuff, there was no psychic stuff. Technically in Night of the Living Dead, it's an asteroid radiation thing. I think there was like a shuttle that had come back and there was radiation in it, and that had like leaked and had just brought back the dead. Yeah, Night of the Living Dead, despite being so iconic, is basically just a space radiation made the dead come back to life. Like Night of the Comet, but probably like 20 years earlier. At least I think that's what Night of the Comet is about. Either way, that's kind of funny, isn't it? But I wanted to kind of talk about them. I wanted to kind of rank them as well in a way. I kind of want to get my ranking out of the way initially. If I look at my letterboxd here, because I'm a fan of these films. I've seen the first 3, I'd say countless times, but not really. I can actually count how many times. At least twice for the first one, 3 or 4 times for the second one, only in the past 4 years, because I waited till it came out at the Astor to see it in the cinema. That was a theatrical cut. Then the second sight Blu-ray release came out, so I watched the theatrical cut again on that. And then I watched the 4K UHD of the Cannes cut, the notorious director's cut, obviously not a director's cut. I've watched the Night of the Living Dead. I watched it a couple of years back. I think it was on TV or something. Then I've recently watched the Criterion, just the standard Blu-ray, not the 4K UHD, but it's still a 4K remaster, and it looks absolutely stunning. And then the third one being Day of the Dead, which I had gotten the Scream Factory edition release. I should use props to show what these look like, but I don't really care. They're all over the place. I mean, they're mostly there, actually. They kind of are, aren't they? Well, I'm a stickler for physical media, so obviously, yes, the Criterion release of Night of the Living Dead, which is a magnificent release, and I would highly recommend it, especially if you haven't seen the film. There was a limited edition release from Umbrella Entertainment, which involved the original and the remake. I only got the version that came with the remake, so yeah, but that's okay. Dawn of the Dead, this is the second sight standard release for the 4K UHD. I have the Blu-ray limited edition set because that's the one I bought first before I decided to get the UHD set, but I watched this one and I used that one as a display piece because despite them having the same artwork, I love the big ass book and it's great to have it on display over there. And it's also got green font. This one has red font. Interesting. But yes, that cut obviously has all 3 versions, including the Argento cut as well. Then you've got Day of the Dead. This is the Scream Factory edition release, which I don't really need anymore now that I think about it, because I'm pretty goddamn certain, in fact, that despite the artwork being fantastic, every single piece of footage on it is on the Umbrella release that I have, which despite it unfortunately still having that image there, does it not flip around? No, there's alternative artwork, but it's a picture of a zombie, which is actually the same as the artwork on that disc there. That's the spare Blu-ray, spare DVD disc that it comes with. But I love this artwork. I bought this, I think I either found it in store or I bought it on eBay, because I decided I wanted to get it because I just wanted this artwork, even though I'm pretty sure it's actually still a part of the Scream Factory release. This is Region B locked, apparently, or just Region B. But it comes with all the same stuff, including all the same special features and everything. I think it comes with a bit of extra stuff, but at the same time it spreads them over 2 different discs, so you got a bit more of a healthier bit rate. That kind of stuff. If you're into the nitty-gritty of details of technical specs, I would suggest this version, but either way, they're both basically the same because they come with the same special features. I think there are just minute differences where the Umbrella version has 1 or 2 extra featurettes, and I think the image looks a bit healthier. So if you're wanting to take a look. This is the Fabulous Films release of Land of the Dead with the original artwork. Technically, actually, this is the Shaun of the Dead artwork, but it does come with 2 different discs, including different artwork on the inside, because it's, again, Fabulous Films. It's a really good release of the film. It comes with the theatrical cut on 1 disc with a bunch of interviews, and the second disc comes with the unrated version plus a bunch of interviews and featurettes, and they all come with commentaries. It also has like when Sean met George and stuff like that. All the behind-the-scenes featurettes and documentaries are there, and they are fantastic. I looked at the documentary making of, I think, of Day of the Dead and Land of the Dead. I don't think I did it for Dawn of the Dead. Definitely don't do it for Night of the Living Dead. I don't know, I just started watching them with their special features as well, because it's really interesting to see Romero talk about them. Either way, this is my last one, which comes with 3 films. You get Survival on the Top Day of the Dead, which is actually the remake by Steve Miner, the guy who did Friday the 13th Part 2, and Diary of the Dead. It comes as 3 separate discs. This is the UK release. If I was to suggest a release, I would suggest this. It does come with the remake of Day of the Dead, which I'm probably going to again talk about later, either in another video or whatever, but I will watch it, unfortunately. I will watch it. Survival of the Dead and Diary. Diary is a really good Blu-ray. It's obviously still a camcorder film, but the special features and everything, the way it's laid out, wonderful stuff. Survival comes with nothing, which sucks. Because as much as I watched the films, I did my best to look into like documentaries, interviews and stuff like that. I watched some of the stuff that Diary of the Dead had. I didn't watch the like 90-minute long documentary because I didn't have time to. But obviously all the supplementaries are great. The fact that George went to the length of actually filming and doing his audio recordings for all the DVDs, like the laser discs, all the different physical releases, and he's added his own voice to them, which is really interesting. It's just fun to watch them. So it's fun to look at the special features. It's fun to look at him talking about his films and how they were received. I think my favorite one being Day of the Dead, in its documentary, kind of, again, it's a simple talking head thing, but them looking back at the film 20, 30 years later, seeing the reception of it now, the cult classic kind of thing that it's become, as, you know, in contrast to Dawn, which is the iconic one, the infamous one. Day of the Dead, people didn't like because they didn't like how different it was to Dawn, but then if you look at Dawn compared to Night, they're still very different. They're all very different films in reality, so it depends on the person as to who they prefer as their best and their favourite. He did note that he was hoping that people would re-examine Survival of the Dead and see it as a better film than people thought it was. And in all fairness, I do think it is a good film. I think all of these are good films. So there's my controversial hot take. I actually think all these films are good. I know that people don't like all the films, but I don't care. So I'm going to do my ranking now just to get it over and done with, so you get an idea of where I'm coming from. But in last place, I currently have Diary of the Dead. Sure, it's the one that people hate the most, and I do think it is the weakest of them, but I still like it. I like camcorder found footage films. I know people don't. It can be a gimmick that can be really annoying, but as a contrast to other zombie films, especially that Romero has done, it was really interesting to watch. That had interesting special features talking about how a lot of them had to be like single takes and stuff with one camera, and he doesn't like doing that. He likes doing like put all these cameras around, get as much footage as possible, and cut it together in post. So the coverage thing, that's like his style of filmmaking. That's why his films don't look as gorgeous as you'd probably think that they would, but they're also low budget. They don't need to look stunning. It's more about the characters and the design work and the story and the and the plot, rather than how it's meant to look. I'd say the plot, but again, most of the time the plot doesn't really matter, which is also fun. It's most of the characters and the zombies, That's what we're there for. The humans hating themselves and wanting to kill each other, and the zombies just wanting to eat and also looking insane. So, yeah, that's my lowest ranks of the 6, but I still gave it 3 stars. I don't like to give movies star ratings anymore, but I gave it 3 out of 5. I think it's pretty good. I still liked it. It has stuff that I don't like, it has stuff that I do like, but we'll dive into each one of them later on. I followed it up with Survival of the Dead. I still gave it 3 stars. It's one of those, in contrast to Diary, it has a better style, but I don't like the characters as much. But there's this stuff that I like, there's that stuff that I don't like. It's a very back and forth between the two, but I definitely think it's better than Diary. Land of the Dead, I gave 4 stars. I know a lot of people don't like Land of the Dead, which is really, really interesting to me. I know it's very on the nose about its themes. I was watching Red Letter Media talk about it, and even they were like, do you think someone just told Romero, hey, your movies have commentary? And he was like, hey, I'm going to make my movie about a commentary. It still is a movie that needed a lot more development, a lot more breathing room for a 90-odd minute film, even though I watched the unrated cut. Clearly that wasn't here's some extra scenes of dialogue and character growth. It's, here's more zombies and gore. It still has some dated effects, but at the same time, they have some really fun kills. So we'll get into that as well. And then the controversial takes. At number 3, we have Night of the Living Dead. I gave it 4.5 stars. It's a masterpiece. It probably is a 5-star film. I think for me, it lacks a little in the middle. It just, again, the low budget element to it is one thing, but I don't really care that much about that. It's more the fact that nothing really happens in the middle. They're just kind of standing around arguing for a bit, which can be interesting for a period of time, but then after a while it gets a bit tiresome. You're just kind of waiting for the zombies to break in and for everything to go to hell. So yeah, it's basically when what's her name, Barbara, when she's asleep, that's basically like the boring part of the film, even though I really like Ben, Dwayne Jones. He's very good in it. Then we have Dawn of the Dead at number 2. Yes, it's not my favourite, but I gave it 5 stars this time. Usually I give it 4 stars. Because I've only seen the theatrical cut. I have not seen the Argento cut, but I'm interested to see it, mostly for the Goblin score, but also because it's just apparently a tighter film in terms of less commentary and comedy and more horror and action. So I'd be interested to see that, but I feel like I'm happy with the 2 cuts I've seen. The theatrical cut is still a bloody good version of the film, but I really liked the Cannes cut. Apparently it doesn't have the Goblin music in it, but I don't really think I noticed it, to be honest, even though I have the soundtrack and I love the soundtrack. I just loved its style. I liked the extra 17 minutes of actually exploring the characters more. There was just a lot of great stuff that was put in it, and I felt like was really lacking from the theatrical cut, because I always felt that the theatrical cut was weaker because it didn't delve more into the characters' psychology and stuff that it could have, and it got a bit boring in the middle. But this time I felt like I was with them. It felt appropriate, so it didn't feel its runtime either. It was good. I really enjoyed it. But again, I gave it 5 stars, so what can I say? A masterpiece. But of course, I do think Day of the Dead is the best. That's my undisputed thing. I've always loved it ever since I first watched it. It's was perfect as the nihilistic film that it is, and then it's got this insanely good gore effects. The story is, well, the characters are compelling. I can't say the story is compelling, but the characters are compelling, and it has some fantastic performances. It's just a really goddamn terrifyingly, dreadful film, but I love it so much. And the behind-the-scenes featurette was really good. But of course, we'll dive into Night of the Living Dead. I don't have much to say on this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. Even my review, I just said they came and got Barbara, because I hadn't reviewed this earlier. I hadn't logged it on my Letterboxd because I had watched it in I don't even know. I watched it as a teenager, and it was kind of goofy then. It had some fear factor to it, sure, but it was kind of goofy. But yeah, I just finally got around to watching the Criterion that I've had for years now, and It's a gorgeous print. It looks stunning. It's a fantastic film. Sure, it's, again, dated and low budget, but I think it works stylistically. It reminds me of Carnival of Souls, which I think even the Astor had like as a double feature sometime in this month of October. They've had that, and it's like, that's a good double feature because they're both very similar films stylistically, a bit different in terms of like looking at characters and stuff, but at the same time really fun. Yeah, I definitely still, I mean, I'd suggest all of these films realistically. I'm not going to dive too much into Night of the Living Dead because what hasn't been said in its own way. Again, it just feels a bit empty in the middle, but at the same time, its low budget nature and everything doesn't stray for me. Even like the, fact it's in black and white. None of that, like, I still love black and white films, but none of that detracts from me for the film, for the experience. So, yeah. No, it's still good stuff, good performances. Dawn of the Dead, I've reviewed it 3 times on here, which is insane. But the first time I watched it was back in 2019, where I gave it 4 stars. I still felt that drag in the middle, which was a bit disappointing, but I gave it 4 stars back then. Same on my rewatch in 2020, which I didn't expect to ever rewatch it. I didn't expect it would ever come to Blu-ray, and of course Second Sight had it, and I actually showed it to my partner as well. But then, yes, 3 years later, I come back and watch it. I say, the only bad thing about being a zombie in the 70s is having a 70s haircut whilst you slowly rot. I viewed the extended cans cut this time. Despite it lacking goblin score, I think I enjoyed the film a lot more. It had more room to breathe and for the characters to have more intimate moments. Plus more zombies and gore, and you can't go wrong with that. It's a classic. Everyone loves it. It's a good, solid flick. It's. I think the fun part about it is by this stage Romero just was having fun with it, and that's always the best parts, when Romero has fun with the ideas, but not just have fun with the ideas, have fun with the zombies. Because the zombie makeup, Tom Savini, it's amazing. It's still not perfected yet. That's when Day comes in. But I love how they still have like goofy looking zombies, not just like because they just look like they're goofy because it's the 70s, but it's goofy because they have characters that are dressed up like in, I think of something like Plants vs. Zombies, where you have regular looking zombies and then look, oh, this one is in a sports outfit and this one is a doctor, stuff like that. I find that stuff to be really fun because Romero's like the only one who does that. With these zombie films, everyone else is like, these zombie films, they gotta look like regular people, they gotta look like a horde of like bloodthirsty animals. It's like, but what if they were just regular people who just, one was in cheerleader practice, got bit, and then turned into a zombie and she was still in her cheerleader outfit? Look at that. Romero has that in one of his films. Do you have that in your zombie film? I don't think so. There's not much to say about Dawn of the Dead. It's a classic. It's great. I loved it this time around. I loved it a lot more, which is just wonderful. But yes, then I watched Day of the Dead, and I said, how many times have I think I've only reviewed it once, so I hadn't actually logged it prior to this. But I said, I love how all of Romero's zombies are in some form of human costumes. Whilst most are in regular clothes, some are just dressed up. For example, a clown, some military grunts, an American football sports player, and etc. There's a nurse, I think, in this one as well. There's like a nurse in almost all of them. Almost. It's basically just, I think, this one. And the Dawn, Day, and Land, I believe, all have a nurse zombie. Actually, no, Diary does as well. You just don't really see her, but she's in scrubs. She's not like the 70s nurse where the little hat and everything. It's a modern day nurse, which is even funnier. Because that's not a goofy costume. It's just, but it's the same idea, the same principle. As much as Romero is known for having heavy social commentary present in his films, he also just knows how to have fun with the designs and costumes. It's also pessimistic as fuck. So, yeah. But I loved it. I thought it was great. And of course, then you get, 20 years later? Yeah, 20 years later, Dawn of the Dead comes out, and oh my god, zombies. Romero, quick, get him, bring him back, do another zombie film. You think the guy was happy just doing what he was doing? I don't know. But this is his first and only big-budget studio film, and it's Land of the Dead. And you can kind of tell. It's a film I gave 4 stars. I watched the unrated cut, which is like 2 minutes longer, I think. I think it was 2 or 4 minutes, because I think it was like 97 minutes for the unrated cut, but 93 minutes for the theatrical cut. I don't know what the differences are. I imagine just some more zombies and some more gore. And to be fair, that is the best part of this movie, the zombies and the gore. Because the human parts are kind of underdeveloped, to say the least. Land of the Dead brings the Romero zombie back in a modern effects era with a less impactful but nevertheless unique and interesting zombie film. Where Day left the world run by zombies and there being no hope for humanity, Land finds it's cornered in a city that, as per Romero's usual commentary flares, pins the greedy rich against the working class and the unwanted, aka zombies. The commentary is not as biting as it is more of a cut that'll maybe heal or retain further infection down the road. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about sometimes, you know? The characters are not too distinct either, but they're not uninteresting, and we have some good performances throughout the general cast. Where the narrative runs into a cliche result, the interest lies in the effects works and the development of the zombies. Greg Nicotero does the zombie effects, and it's very realistic and gross. Sure, it's no Tom Savini, but he has a great style, and obviously he's been doing that for the past, 30-odd years, especially when you look at, what's that show? The Walking Dead? So, he kind of been doing that for a while, hasn't he? But this also adds some sound effects for the extra gut-wrenching punch. There are some great sound effects that really make some of the kills really gruesome. One of them being like a silhouette of, I think, someone's head getting ripped out of its, of the neck. And you just get all like the spine and blood and guts, and you just get those great sound effects. It's really gross, to put it lightly. There's one part where a zombie's reaching down someone's throat and grabbing out their intestines and whatever, and just eating it like that. There's another person who gets a zombie grabs from the inside of their mouth and rips their flesh off their face. It's just some great effects work, Again, no Tom Savini, but holy crap. These are the main three I'm going to really discuss because they're the ones that I don't think are as well discussed contrast to the original three. I mean, if you haven't seen Day of the Dead, it's a masterpiece. Watch it. I don't really have too much to say about it because it's just such an amazingly made film. It's terrifying in a completely frustrating way because humanity sucks and zombies are just everywhere. And you still got costume zombies in it. It's fun. The zombies are clearly the best part as they evolve to traverse the locations and find weapons and just generally pull a Planet of the Apes. It's good stuff and very Romero, down to the zombie dressed as a clown. It's always fun that he just has this element where it's like, what can we do with the zombies next? It's never, what do we do with the humans next? It's what do we do with the zombies next? It's always still what do we do with the humans, but the fact that he always finds something interesting for the zombies to do is great. The first one, they're uprising. The second one, the consumerist. The third one, they just want food, my guy. The third one's probably the most uninteresting versions of the zombies. Oh, but you do got Bud. Or is it Bob? I always thought it was Bob, but I think it's Bud. So you have Bud. I should probably double check that is actually his name, but I'm bloody well certain it is. Bub. Close. I always get that wrong. Okay, so we got some real evolution there. That's like a real fixed point of evolution. The human narrative is fine. It's been adapted a few times in more modern zombie shows, but I still think Romero adds good flavor, even if it could have used the extra runtime to develop the characters more. It got to a point where I just didn't really care that Dennis Hopper was still alive, and he didn't really do much as a character, with his actions being more of a puppeteer, so his evil work is less directly seen and more discussed through visual and expositional dialogue. You see what he's doing because of his power, the shit that people get into, the stuff that they have to do to survive, because he's being the greedy rich man of, I'm going to make all the rich people stay in this nice tower that I stole, and everyone else who I will give small pockets of money can protect us and get us food and whatever. So, it's one of those things of, he didn't need to be on screen as much as he was. It's still fun to see him. Dennis Hopper, he's great. But it's like, it could have been better if he just maybe it was more the idea of him was emphasized a lot stronger, If he was maybe more ruthless when you saw him in a way, I feel like, I don't know. It's just not a perfect thing. there's a bit of obvious exposition here and there that should be obvious to the characters in the film, but just it feels like dumb exposition used for the audience to understand why things are happening. The opening scene is the most obvious one, where one character's like, well, why are you using the fireworks, and what does it do? And it's like, well, we've discovered that fireworks distract zombies because they see the bright lights and exploding noises, and they look at that and they're distracted. Except for that one zombie who evolves, and is like, hey, wait a second, these humans are taking our stuff and just killing our people. I don't like that, you know? Commentary. It's not as dark as the previous films, I guess studio mandate for one thing, but there's just so many people now that are continuing their lives like nothing is wrong. Even when things do go wrong, it goes by so quickly that most of the impact time is spent on the gory kills over the actual impact of innocent lives being lost. You know? Zombies finally get in. Oh, look, all these people who you didn't really care about, but you just knew as rich snobs are now getting eaten. But it's like, okay, cool. Hooray. Gnarly gore effects. Look at that guy. His jugular's gone kablooey. Wow. This is an unfortunate trope in zombie films when there is such a diverse cast of characters that are just alive to most likely become fodder down the line. Even the smaller characters that are set up, the dad with his sick kid, are fine by the end of the film. So there's less of a tragedy and more of a humanity will survive no matter kind of message that Romero hasn't really tried to enforce before. Again, feels like a studio mandate. No, those characters, they gotta survive. You gotta have the hope for the audience, you know, that these people will survive. But if they died, it would be like a lot more brutal. Like, oh shit, the amount of stuff the main character went through to get those guys to survive, and they still were killed by the zombies. That could have been a much more prominent message of, yeah, no matter what you do, no matter how much good stuff you do for people that can give you good morals, make people like you more, those people are still going to get eaten by zombies eventually, you know, they're still going to get screwed over. But the movie doesn't carry that out. It's just like, nah, the rich people die and some poor people that we don't know just get killed. Hey, you see this lesbian couple, they're dead now. You know, that just happens in the movie, and I'm like, okay, sure. Movie, do whatever you want, you know. It's not exactly a bad thing though, you know. It's just so unlike his previous zombie films that it feels like this could be setting up sequels rather than being its own thing. You know, whereas all the rest of the films are pretty adamant that sure, stuff can continue, or probably not with Night of the Living Dead, but I guess the world can still continue. But you look at Dawn and Day and the end of their narratives, and it's like they could continue. They haven't, and they won't. But they could. Thank God they didn't. You know, why ruin a really, really iconic ending or a really interesting ending with next time on Day of the Living Dead #2. It's the morning now. I don't know. Morning of the Living Dead. Anyway, overall, Land of the Dead is still a fine addition to Romero's zombie canon. And whether you see it as a sequel to Day or just another attempt at making a dead world, it is still another Romero film in the end, and that's something to like about it, basically. He always knew how to make zombies interesting. 2 years later, we got Diary, and people were like, man, this guy sucks. He's just making low-budget shit. Oh, how dare he actually do what he wants to do. Diary of the Dead. Again, I gave it 3 stars. I liked all these films, what can I say? For the most part, I will be just reading my reviews from Letterboxd, but still. Misinformation is the theme, and everyone's an asshole is the plot. Diary of the Dead is the standard day one of the zombie outbreak, but presented in a modern digital era context with the camcorder first-person perspective. It's designed as a commentary on misinformation and priority of the truth no matter what, which is interesting, and I do like its style because it's a zombie outbreak in the modern age. What if we had camcorders and we were able to film everything and broadcast it online? But obviously some people still made the argument of like, well, I mean, we've been doing that for like 10 years prior to this movie coming out. We don't really need a Romero being like, I'm old man talking about the kids stuff. Look at this internet. I have heard those criticisms, and I'm like, yeah, it is what it is. But I mean, like, at the same time, I was a kid when this came out, and I wasn't that on the internet, so then knowing that this came out then, for me, it's like, is more of an evolved context than something like, if I was 10 years old and was like, oh, I've been on MySpace for the past 5 years, I know what this stuff is, this doesn't impress me, you know, YouTube's been around since 2005, this stuff doesn't impress me. So in some contexts, for some audiences, yes, I can understand, this doesn't impress you, it's fine. And anyway, if you don't like camcorder found footage stuff, you won't like this film anyway, so don't bother with it. As a narrative feature, the film is fine. There's a large group of characters that we follow, and though most of them die, I never found it to be uninteresting. We get multiple perspectives given there's more than one camera at one stage. Initially, there's just one, and they kind of have fun with that, where there's like, oh, it needs to charge, and they have to put it down, and there's like, but we're not capturing what's happening. It becomes a thing, and then they just find another camera that happened to be from a guy from a birthday party who was murdered by a zombie, so, a clown zombie, actually. They pull off the red nose, and it's just blood, and it's like he gets bitten by the clown zombie. Now that's funny. Good old Romero still has clowns. But still, you know, that was a bit of a messy thing when they started doing these weird edits of like these bleeps and stuff, and it was like, oh, we're gonna cover the screen in blue for half a second and be like, yeah, it's an editing thing. It's like, you don't need to do that. Edit it like a film. Stop editing it like a YouTube video, George. My God. So there is some technical stuff that's a bit annoying when watching the film, especially because at the start of it, it's filmed very casually, so the camera's like on an angle for like the first like 5 or so minutes of the film. So because it's just on and recording, and then they're like, actually, let's focus this and make it. Well, we've decided to make this into a documentary. Yeah, it could have been called Documentary of the Dead over Diary, because Diary implies that there's multiple entries that are all about the same, you know, different days and whatever, but it's like, nah, it's not really. It's more of a documentary of the dead, because that's kind of what it's meant to be. It's not really a journalistic, every single day we're adding new stuff. It's definitely a one whole feature-length film. It's designed to be that way, so documentary would have done a better name than Diary. Especially because at one stage I was just expecting the main character to just whip out his book and be like, I'm just going to write in my journal. But no, it's obviously a video diary. Vlog of the Dead. There you go. There's your modern version, George. Vlog of the Dead. The film does change style every once in a while when security cameras and alternate cameras are accessed, so that can at least add for some different visual flair and doesn't keep it boring, but still, it depends on if you like found footage, because if you don't, then you're going to get every single type of found footage in this goddamn movie. Sorry. There's also a nice selection of cutaways to footage that other people have shot and uploaded to the internet. This is like a lesser of interest thing than something like Zombieland did, where they were like, let's look at, you know, this other people in this other country or this other part of the States where they've killed the zombie of the week, you know, stuff like that, where Zombieland made it a lot more fun. This one doesn't do that, but is showing, again, the commentary stuff. Oh, this is what's actually happening. This is the truth. This is how zombies are being depicted here and there, and how people are dealing with them and whatever. So, as a documentary style thing, it works. It's interesting. I like it. It can be a little dated. There's one person, a girl who has a cell phone kind of deal where she uses that as a camera, and it's like, you see how this is one whole big frame? It's like the size of my phone in the frame is just video footage, and it's like, it's obviously like it looked terrible when they filmed it, and like, shit, we've just put all this money and stuff into the effects of running over all these zombies with a camcorder phone. Maybe we shouldn't have filmed it that way. We'll just put the footage in anyway. We'll just make it smaller so it doesn't look as bad. Blowing it up, you would have been like, oh my god, look at all these pixels. So, yeah, early day camcorder stuff. Whoop-de-doo, hooray. Not even early day, my god. Inland Empire had come out before this. What was that other one? The 28 Days Later had come out before this. Which I think is a lot of the reason why Land of the Dead and Diary and whatever aren't considered as bold, because in the same year that you have, you know, Dawn of the Dead and then Land of the Dead, but then you've also got 28 Days Later. It's like, there are clearly better zombie films than Land of the Dead that exist at the time. So hence a lot of people didn't like it as much. I like it for what it is, but know that it does feel very modern. It feels a lot like The Walking Dead, and that it was something that was developed, like the ideas of living in a tower or the rich versus the poor, that kind of society stuff was definitely copied a lot into The Walking Dead and developed a lot better, and deserves either a bit more runtime in the feature film or just a TV show. And you can continue the narrative. It works better in the TV show than it does in a movie, so it feels like a feature-length pilot. You know, that's my dismay, my main dismay of Land of the Dead. Underdeveloped stuff, and it feels like it should have been a longer film or a TV show. Diary, on the other hand, as I was saying, The film itself feels lower budget than the previous entry, Land of the Dead, clearly. But this gives more focus on the characters and the psychology of them as they deteriorate over the film. That's the strongest part of the film, is seeing how these early days of the zombie apocalypse still affect people, because you don't really have that in many other Romero films. I know Night of the Living Dead is the start of the apocalypse, but it's a night of. Dawn of the Dead follows it a lot stronger, so this is more or less very similar to Dawn of the Dead in that aspect. It's been a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months into it, but in this case for Diary it's a couple of days. It's over the course of a weekend, basically. This definitely feels like the strongest element, especially with its design to feel like a documentary. However, because of this design, the narrative doesn't get too crazy, and if you're a video game person, you could get a similar experience playing something like Project Zomboid or DayZ with some friends. You could just do that, and you get the exact same experience from this movie, except a lot more fun. Overall, the film is a fine effort and still feels very Romero. The film isn't anything overly special, but it's not bad either. You get some scares, some cliche moments, but some nice character dynamics, and an overall feeling that this may seem hopeless, but maybe it also isn't. There's one character who thinks she's killed a bunch of people because they still are grappling with the fact of, are these zombies, are they not zombies? And she shoots herself because she just can't deal with it. Stuff like that. That's probably the best part of the film, but it's pretty early on. The last 20 minutes aren't too bad, so I guess there's that as well. But it's a bit predictable as to what happens to the main character because of who narrates it. I guess because the main character isn't the cameraman, it is actually the girl. But again, yeah. It's also really interesting that Romero chose to go against his usual style of lots of coverage for the single camera focus. This meant more long takes and the aim to get a scene done in one sitting, which is easier said than done. He even said in the documentary, one of the interviews, that he didn't like doing this style because of how hard it was for him, but he did say that because a lot of the people he filmed with were theatre students, they knew how to get things done in one go. So that allowed for a lot more, a lot of an easier transition. But still, he just said there's one whole take where they just go into a house, try to turn off an alarm, go into the garage, realize that there is backpacks and a car, and they go around the car and they discuss all this stuff. One whole take for like 3-4 minutes, and it was really difficult to shoot. So something that seems as simple as that kind of a take is very difficult for him. So it's at least nice that he's tried a different style and a different approach, and I think it's interesting. It pays off decently. But, yeah, it's not perfect. He also doesn't focus on the zombies in this film, not really, which is kind of the point in a way. It's about the characters and what they go through and their attempts to capture and upload the footage. It's a commendable effort and contributes to Romero's streak of just doing something different with each film. I still love that Romero managed to have a clown zombie, so I guess that was noteworthy. It is interesting that he doesn't focus too much on the zombies in this film. There are some jump scares, I guess. I can't really remember, but yeah, kind of. But yeah, no, they do have some scary moments, I guess. But it is mostly about the humans and how they are surviving in this world, and the idea again of uploading the footage and whatever. But the thing is too is that you don't see the reaction to the footage at all. It's about making the documentary and it being released, but then they don't actually show the effects of that. Does it actually help anyone? Does it not? There is a part where one of the characters is talking about how they've uploaded footage showing the truth, and it's got it's got 70k clicks. By tomorrow it'll probably have 1 million, so the internet's still running for people. It's still working, which is interesting. Obviously, modern age stuff probably wouldn't break down as quickly in an apocalypse, but sometimes it just does. So it's interesting to see that kind of stuff and how he tries to develop it in the world. So, yeah. But that being said, Survival of the Dead actually carries over as a direct sequel to one of the parts where they find this military group who steal their stuff. And the movie starts with the main guy we see there, who's the same actor, talking about how, we were in this documentary that was uploaded online by these university kids who were making a film, and it made us mega famous. But then you watch the film itself and no one actually references it at all. They don't meet anyone who's seen this documentary, but it's interesting that they obviously reference that and the fact that it came out and it was a thing, So I like that as a continuation thing, so they did have some kind of an impact. but it doesn't do the impact on the movie that you'd expect. It just feels like, oh, I can just kind of grab those characters and put them into this film, so we can start with characters that I've already set up, and then continue from there, and they can hang out with these other characters that I've developed that the film is actually about, and that our main characters have no real relation to whatsoever. They're just kind of in the same world as them. But the internet's still there, and one of the guys in the film decides to upload a YouTube video saying, hey, come to this island, come to this dock, we'll go to this island together, and I'll show you paradise where there's no zombies. Which is his way of saying, come to my place, I'll kill you. Or if you help me out, we can go back to my island and kill the people there. You don't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Survival of the Dead. It's basically a film about two warring, rivaling Irish families on an island just off the coast of some part of America. And one of them gets kicked off the island because he thinks that everyone who turns into a zombie should be killed because, it'll spread infection and whatever, and the zombie plague will keep going. But then the other guy is like, no, I think they will eventually be healed, and we can help them, and we can teach them to not eat humans, and they can eat animals and stuff. And obviously the final realization of the movie, minor spoilers, but not really, they're both right, but for different reasons. We'll get into it. Let me just kind of talk about the film, because I've got a lot to say. Romero's final film, Survival of the Dead, and a fittingly low-budget zombie film, continues one character's journey from the world set up in Diary. Of his zombie features, this feels the least Romero, in a way, in which the commentary is loose and more or less about human rivalry despite the external issues. It's basically a commentary on war. He made a zombie western about war. It's just that. That's why it feels as loose, whereas every other film, you can see the commentary. Oh, Diary is about internet and misinformation. Land of the Dead is about the poor versus the rich. It's all stuff like that. All the commentary stuff is very on the nose in a lot of them. But you look at Survival, it's like, it's actually kind of not as on the nose. Like, it's still there, but it's more as you can read into it, into what exactly is it talking about. But it's basically talking about war and rivalry. But, the conflict between peoples, despite what everyone else thinks and what the external places are like. I don't know. War, But it doesn't feel as forced or heavy-handed as some of his previous films. So, especially Land of the Dead. So, yeah. There's also no attempt at having any zany zombies like in his previous films, unless you count Irish farmer zombies. Basically just zombies that are so used to their older life. It's like Land of the Dead, where they continue their older lifestyle as zombies, one of them being a service station attendant, a gas station attendant, who's still trying to fill up cars with petrol, but there's no cars there to be filled and whatever. It's the same in this one, where they're just like, oh, well, this one's a mailman, so he's going to be delivering mail, but he's changed this one mailbox and he's going to keep trying to deliver mail. And then one of them's a farmer, so they're just like doing crops. One of them rides a horse, so they're just on a horse the whole time, stuff like that. It's kind of goofy, but that's like as far as you get with the zany kind of Romero zombie-like stuff, where it's like, they used to be like this, and they continue their old lives, whereas like, you look at The Walking Dead, and it's like, they don't care about their old lives. They're all about eating flesh, and that's all that matters to them. It's not about, oh man, I remember shooting people, I'm going to get my gun and start shooting people. That's the Romero zombie for you, but not most other zombies. The narrative it's fine. Though it's nothing amazing, but for a 90-minute runtime, it doesn't feel too bloated or empty. It feels very opposite to Land of the Dead, where it feels like everything's deliberate, done purposefully, and is wrapped up fine and nicely, whereas Land is the opposite. It has a lot of stuff in it, and it doesn't pay off a lot of stuff, and it just feels underdeveloped as well. I keep going back to that, but the modern trilogy is worth noting, even though none of these films are related except for Diary and Survival, and what was meant to be Twilight but never happened, as in Twilight of the Dead, which was actually meant to be a sequel to Land of the Dead, which is kind of funny. But it's basically about the military group we saw in the previous film as they encounter a potentially safe haven that happens to be an island run by two opposing families. Again, it's pretty basic and none of it feels very expressive or overly memorable. Even the end result being that the zombies can eat creatures other than humans isn't that groundbreaking, at least to me. I mean, by this stage I'd seen The Walking Dead and they had did that in the pilot. That came out a year after this movie had come out, so it's like, maybe there weren't any other zombie films where the zombies ate animals. I don't know, I'm pretty sure there were, but I could be wrong. But yeah, so that's why it doesn't strike me as that amazing. Like, oh look, zombies can eat other animals. Whoop-de-doo, maybe? I don't know. The ones where they go after brains in particular is a lot more interesting to me, I feel like, than just eating regular flesh. But most Romero zombie films are just they eat flesh. That's it. The flesh of the living, but that doesn't imply humans. It could be anyone. They don't even really eat brains, do they? No, not really. That was like Return of the Living Dead. They crave brains. Anyway, what can I say about the characters? The characters are likable, and I did come to care about some of them, but not as much as previous Romero characters. However, I think more so than Diary, the Diary characters, because they're all like uni students and stuff, feel a bit more pretentious. Especially the teacher, they're all very pretentious, but then you look at Survival and they're like military grunts, they're just trying to survive and have a life in the shitty world that they've been left with. So, and then you got the people who are on the island and everything, so it's like there are still people to care about, and there's interesting dynamics between that. But yeah, so definitely better than Diary in that aspect. The jump scares aren't too bad. There's actually a small section where there are some jump scares, which I don't expect from a Romero film. You don't really go into a Romero zombie film with the expectation of jump scares. There's the occasional, oh, there's one loose zombie in this dark place, and there might be a dramatic build-up, and they'll eventually attack the person. That's the scary part of a zombie attacking one of the main characters. I hope they survive. But it's not really jump scare related stuff. None of these films really have done that before. So, I mean, Land of the Dead kind of did. I guess it's a very modern approach, though. You gotta have some jump scares in there. Get the audience really, whoa, scary zombies. Oh, don't come at me, bro. Yeah. He's always been able to go for the psychological horror and gross out effects, of which this film does have both. But I think it does the gross out effects nicely, whereas Diary is more about the psychology. I guess also because of budget and stuff and how they shot Diary, that they focused less on gory effects and more on the characters, you know, so you're not going to have an over-the-top kill in Diary, but then you look at Land and you look at Survival and you get those kills and those great effects work. So there's still some fun effects work even in Survival. That's really cool. You get some people getting torn open. It's great. It's like this feels Romero. This feels like a Tom Savini thing. It's not, but it feels like it, and that's what's nice about it. The contrast is probably because of how these two films were filmed, with the first person Diary having too much to prep for, so the overly gnarly effects probably were harder to pull off, so focusing on the characters' mental well-being was an easier choice. Survival is shot like a standard film, probably even a standard Romero film with lots of coverage, but with some nicer cinematography. There wasn't a documentary making of or commentary to listen to on my Blu-ray, so I don't really know what the mindset was, but then I looked it up on Wikipedia, and apparently Romero even said that he and his friends, who they're all just mates, all buddies, they went and watched this one Western film, and he's like, this is what I want the movie to be like. And then he was like, actually, I kind of want it to be shot like that as well. So they shot it like a Western. So it just looks stylized and nicer. It was interesting to see that in the Day of the Dead doco, how Romero considered Day and Survival to be his misunderstood masterpieces, and that he was just waiting for people's opinions to change on Survival, given that most people had already warmed up to Day by that stage. So of course I went in with an open mind, and although I did like this film, I do think it's the weakest of Romero's zombie films. Arguably it's like on par with Diary, if not a little better. In this case I think it's a little bit better. But they have their issues that falter back and forth. Again, the lack of zombies in Diary, but then Survival, actually, I don't know, the commentary's not as sharp, I don't know. Survival's clearly better the film of the two, so it doesn't really matter that much. I will say that I wasn't disappointed by it though, and as a film to go out on, it's still nicely made. The cinematography was a standout, at least, with the final stunning shot that I think emphasizes his commentary of the film the most. Most of the best parts stem from either the theme of rivalry and war being endless, but also from the inspiration of westerns, which was the visual style that it was based on. overall, if you haven't seen Romero's final film, I do suggest you go watch it. Go in with an open mind, though, as it won't be nearly as good as you'd hope. That being said, Romero got to go out with a film that he wanted to make. You know, he wanted to make a low-budget zombie film that was about the people, about this simple idea. Hey, here's this idea, let's film it, this will be fun. They made it. It's still an interesting watch and an interesting film. It's not perfect. It's nowhere near as good as his original masterpieces or even some of his other films like Martin and Creepshow and whatnot. But I still think it's really good. It's sad that it was so poorly received when it came out, so because of that, he just didn't make any more films after that. And even though he did try making Twilight of the Dead by 2017, he unfortunately passed away before he was able to finish the script. So yeah, it's an imperfect thing, and it sucks that it is how it is, but I still think it's pretty fun. But, I mean, as an overall, I think that they're really interesting films. I love his style of filmmaking and the way he presents the zombies and the characterizations, the little quirky things of the characters and how each zombie is dressed up differently. The gore effects are nice. They change from film to film, but they're always interesting. The zombies are always unique. The people in their scenarios are usually still as nihilistic as the previous one, but it's still an interesting conception and realization of all these different ideas. So as an overall, I think that Romero did a really interesting job with these zombie films. I would love to see more films in this style, and I know a lot of people have tried remaking and doing continuations of his narratives, but a lot of them don't understand the style and don't understand his style of commentary, whether you like the commentary or not. So, yeah, as an overall, I'd suggest watching obviously all of them. If you haven't seen them before, go find them. I've got some Blu-rays here. There's your list, your wish list. Go check them out. There are some American releases for the Land of the Dead from Scream Factory, and Survival and Diary have also got American releases. So if you're interested in Region A versions, there are some of those as well. As an overall, thanks for watching. I apologize for the background noise. It's suddenly become that kind of a day. But yeah, so check out my letterbox down below and my Instagram and whatever, and I'll see you next time where I don't talk about zombie films. Or I do, where I talk about the remakes that happened for Night and Dawn and Day, and let's see if they're any goddamn good. Adios.